everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. You know, if you've listened to this podcast, you know that I care about ending energy poverty. The only way to end energy poverty is through fiscal responsibility and having the least amount of impact on the environment. And one of the hottest buttons that I have out there right now is the way that Africa is being treated around the world. And I happen to have two world energy experts here. I have NJ Ayuk. He is the executive director of the African Energy Chamber, and he is in South Africa today. How are you today, NJ?
I'm doing amazing. Great weather, great food. Who can complain about South Africa? And the wine is
I,
even better.
I tell you what, it was a year ago. Your podcast went nuts with me and Cyrus and you, and I am just looking forward to getting an update. And now our other expert is he is the founder and I believe chairman of RBAC, and he is Dr. Robert Brooks. Welcome and thank you for stopping by the podcast, sir.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. Actually, the Cyrus that you were talking about happens to be my son. And I think Cyrus and NJ have had a chance to get together. So I'm really happy that I'm going to be able to substitute for Cyrus today, who had some other pressing matters and so was not able to attend here. But this is, Stu, is a topic that is extremely important to my heart. Actually, Africa is a place that while my son Cyrus has actually visited and been and currently is in South Africa and has been there several times and spent quite a bit of time there and is familiar with much of what goes on in Joburg, including the food that you were talking about. And Jay, he tells me it's great, but I have not had that opportunity. I've been to different parts of the world. I've been to China. I've been to Central Asia. I've been all over Europe and of course, all over the United States, which is a lot by itself. But I'm hoping actually to visit areas, whether it's South Africa or other parts of Africa, sometime in this lifetime.
I'll tell you what, if I get so excited, and people know that when I get excited, I just kind of like start really diving into things. NJ, could you tell us what's going on with the African Energy Chamber this year, and what are some of your hottest topics right now?
We still have to deal with big issues around energy growth and being energy poverty in Africa. And I think it has continued to stay at the forefront of these issues. And I think, as you see, in the next few weeks, we're going to have COP. So we have been working a lot, planning, giving African leaders the ingredients they need, the arguments they need to combat a global wave that is saying, and fossil fuel production in Africa, just stop oil and move quickly into renewables, which we're not against, but we want to do that in our own timeline. We work a lot with the African government to improve their fiscal regimes and look at regulatory issues and deal with above ground risk issues to make them attractive for investments to come in, but also at the same time driving up African energy producers, African companies to be competent enough to be able to be those drivers of change that the continent wants to see and people want to see. But also we've been advocating for market discipline, personal responsibility, individual liberty, and really pushing governments to work on fiscal responsibility issues. And that is really something that has kept the African Energy Chamber really busy this year. I barely spend a week, a month at home. It's a lot of pressure. But I think that, those of us that have been given a lot more education, great education from the United States, great opportunity, we owe it to so many that have not gotten there to give back and to really open doors so that we can unleash an African potential to have an African dream, because that is really when we start seeing Africa well.
There is a theory that I have done in the past, and that is the more money that is wasted in bad energy policies, the more fossil fuels are used. And we're seeing that play out in Germany and New York, in the UK, when energy policies are saying that they want to go to 100% renewable energy. and not worry about it. They want to cut out, like Germany cutting out their nuclear power plants, and now they're having to reopen their coal plants. And it makes more sense that we go to low cost natural gas first, and really, instead of coal. In Johannesburg, in South Africa, uses a lot of coal. And so if we have a least amount of impact on the environment, it would seem that we want to use natural gas as a resource in Africa. And Dr. Brooks, I believe you had a great question just a minute ago. Do you want to rephrase, kind of get that question back in there, and let NJ tackle that one?
I will do that. And just to comment on what you just said, I mean, I think it's a great point. I was recently had a chance to have dinner actually with a couple, husband and wife from Germany.
Oh,
And
cool.
the wife could speak passable English. The husband couldn't speak at all English. And I don't speak German. We had a conversation through the wife, and really they were sort of. I was kind of surprising, but they were talking about the deindustrialization of Germany.
Yep.
It is the most insane thing that you could imagine. That the country that had the best engineers and the best manufacturing on the entire planet, it's just being totally wasted because of what you were just talking about. Now energy costs are so expensive and so forth, and they're importing so many goods from China and other places that the German people are really beginning that slide, I think, down the economic scale, and
Right.
it is really very, very sad. So what you said is really correct. I think what we have found, and this is a little bit political, but the more that government imposes themselves
Right.
on energy policy as a general rule, the worse things go. Things get worse, not better. And it's better to I mean, here's another thing, Ed, and I'm sorry to take all the time, but I don't know if NJ went to Gas Tech, but I was at Gas Tech in Houston, 45,000 people there. I went to a number of the different talks that were given, and when the talk was given by like a CEO of Chevron or something like this, it's like you listen to these people and you say, these people know what they're doing. They are truly experts that really understand. And then you listen to the government people, and it's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, it's truly that way. I mean, these are people who are supposedly they're working for the government, and supposedly they understand energy and energy policy and all, and they don't know anything. It's just ideology. So when ideology is more important, than practicality or pragmatics or just, general understanding of economics or those sort of things, it's generally not going to be good. So, okay, I'm done with my rant. But you asked me, we had been talking a little bit previously about, what happens in terms of government, or where should I say, investment in Africa. And you
Right.
were indicating that there was a trend for more investment by oil and gas majors around the world in Africa. And you pointed to, I think, more to the offshore rather than onshore. Okay, so I think we need to distinguish offshore and onshore, because they're
Okay.
very, very different kinds of activities. But, basically, in order for a company to do drilling, whether it's offshore Angola or Nigeria or Mozambique or South Africa or any of these places, they have to have an agreement in place, a concession by the government that is going to allow them to do this. And part of that concession or agreement involves, how do you split the revenue? Okay, or how
Right.
do you split the profits, or whatever it is. So it's not just that a Western company can come in and take 100% of the value of these other countries. Some split is necessary. Now, NJ would know a lot more about what is fair and what's not fair and all of the other aspects of that. But the point is, what happens to the revenue that goes to the African country? Does that end up going to just the top leader and his cronies? The elite, who are in charge of that country, or does it go into funds that truly are going to help that country to develop the economy as it should? So I think that that's very important, and so I'd like to have NJ comment about that, but I also would like him to comment on one related thing, which is I don't really hear that much about onshore development of oil and gas resources in Africa, but you would think that onshore would be a very different thing in the sense that onshore you would have potentially opportunities for smaller companies in Africa, to actually participate. Whereas offshore development, there's no way that you can get a wildcatter. Even in Texas, you don't have small companies doing offshore development in the deep water Gulf of Mexico. I mean, this is billions and billions of dollars. So it's a very different thing. So I hope I haven't made this too complicated, but kind of two related questions there for you.
Now I know you're American. Buy one get one free. So you throw it in there. But I'll start with your comment around having dinner with the German. You're right. They industrialize in Germany, and that's going to really hurt them bigly. But also one of the things you're going to look at is that the polarization and the demonization of the fossil fuel industry, and especially natural gas, is really, really troubling, not just in America or Europe, but globally, and it's really affecting us. You're not going to leapfrog from coal into solar. The sun is not going to blow forever, and it's not going to shine forever. The wind is not going to blow forever. You might need natural gas forever in order to get us into a just and orderly transition, because you need to have pragmatic common sense and an approach in order to make this, in that we don't shock energy systems, we don't create a volatile energy market, and we continue to move that. I'm amazed that in a country, like America, with land of the free, home of the braves, where they always get it right, they have shifted so radical to the left that we don't know how to even discuss quality energy discussions anymore. When it comes to Africa, with the contracts and with what you see, these concessions are being signed with governments, because most of the constitutions do say that the natural resources belong to the state. But we have to rethink that, because if we don't rethink that, we are going to have a system where we continuously have a lot of money going to the state, whether it ends up in corruption or it ends up with politicians in parliament doing a lot of projects, but we're not really, and then we have strong government control of the market and the economy. That is not the best system for us. We need to embrace more free market solutions where everyday people are building businesses, driving up the economy, they're taking the country by their own hands, they're looking at entrepreneurship, and they become drivers of the future. So let's look at onshore. Offshore gas or offshore exploration is big. And I put it this way: to do an offshore well, you're looking at $60 to $90 million deep water well. That's a lot of money for anybody to go put there. Onshore Africa, to spot an onshore well, you're looking between $7 to $15 million. That's something that even African banks, African development banks, or even people raising small private equity or hedge funds or small capital markets, they can even do that and still be able to compete. But here's the sweet part about onshore gas development in Africa. You know what? Because it's being developed in communities that really need that natural gas. They'll be able to solve our energy poverty problems, because that gas can be piped right within that community, and they will be able to pay for it, and you'll be able to develop that gas, and you'll be able to then do something. Even if the gas is too much, you'll be able to do some of the byproducts of natural gas we put on sea. Food security, and you know how you address that? You look at fertilizer plants, urea, ammonia, NPK. You do that, and then we solve our food security problems, because most people who are shouting about just stop oil and end oil today don't understand what Africa goes through with food insecurity. If you end natural gas production today, 50% of Africans are left to perish, because we will not have fertilizers to really grow our agricultural products. Isn't it something that a country at war, Ukraine, is supplying Africa with food? That is something that is stunning. Wow. And we need to rethink where we are right now. And so those that call for end of natural gas and end of exploration onshore, they should truly be thinking who they're trying to help. Is it the African people, or they're trying to satisfy their ideology. Our lives in Africa are so much important and so better. We're not some case study that you could sit in the Hamptons, sipping your martini and discussing us as some kind of case study in your PhD thesis. We do think we deserve to have the dignity of life and the dignity to be able to build better
Yes.
families.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
totally agree with you. A couple of points here. Stu, is it okay if I take off, or you have a question?
Hey, I'm
Okay,
sorry. I
so
want to give you a hug. I'm sorry. I want to give you a hug, NJ. That was absolutely wonderful. Sorry.
yeah, that absolutely great. And I think, your points on, first of all, the demonization of fossil fuels is very counterproductive, certainly for Africa and other places. And I would just say ignore it. As that my advice to Africa would be, to whatever extent you can, ignore that, because that's just dumb. It's just stupid. And natural gas is really, really important. And one of the reasons why it's important is, in addition to what you were just talking about, is that in many, many natural gas formations, you actually have wet natural gas, which means that it has a lot of liquids with it, and those liquids are primarily propane and some degree of butane and some other things. But the point is that if you produce the natural gas, if it is wet, you can separate the liquids relatively. It's not totally inexpensive, but it's straightforward. The technology is very, very well known to separate the liquids. And then the liquids themselves are a hugely important product. Propane and LPG is such an important product to get people off of biofuels for cooking and heating in African places, which are my understanding is that they cause a lot of illness, especially to women and babies, in homes, who are continually facing the fumes from fires and wood fires and charcoal fires and so forth. You can get inexpensive stovetops that are run by LPG, that use LPG for cooking, and it makes a whole complete different difference, and it's huge. And there have been a few places where it's caught on there in Africa, and they've done well, but it's got a huge potential for the future. Now, the other really, really, really important thing is that the LPG can be moved by truck and then by small transport. So that means that you have jobs for people, in delivering fuel to central depots, and then for small delivery vehicles to deliver, tanks of LPG to people's homes around the country. So, in other words, it doesn't require the expense of building out a full-fledged natural gas delivery system, pipeline system, which is often expensive. So, to me, the ideal scene would be LPG for, home and for small businesses, especially the ones that are using it for fuels, restaurants, and so forth. And then you use the natural gas for electric power. Okay, so you use that, you build your electric power, because those are the two things that you really need. Okay, you need to handle your local fuel needs and commercial fuel needs, but everybody needs electric power. And so that's the thing that I think is missing from much of Africa at this point, and can be handled through your own resources, and potentially at a lower cost than developing giant offshore oil and gas fields, which, by the way, mostly are oil fields, because the super majors want oil, because oil is so much more profitable than natural gas. So they're not as interested truly in natural gas. So I think that this is potentially a way to go, and that could be really helpful to the people. And I know that things are still very difficult in Africa, but I think that there has been a fair amount of progress. And one thing that actually really creates hope in my mind for Africa is the success recently that we've seen in India. Okay, so India is doing so much better than what it was. I mean, just earlier in my life, India was, it was always considered to be, an interesting country, and interesting history and religions and traditions and all of those things, but just unbelievable poverty. It was like there was no chance. I mean, just look at, some of the movies, recently there was one that was just horrible, about, that was quite an interesting movie, but about the conditions in India. You had that in China also, but there were very different development programs in India and China. In China, because of its background and communistic government, was a centrally planned economy from the very beginning, and it was going nowhere. It was just it didn't work at all. Again, this is the government officials don't know what the heck that they're doing, really, compared to experts. But under, I believe it was Nixon originally, the United States decided to help China, okay, by bringing it into the world economy instead of isolating it. And so China became this very, very strange combination of communism and what I call super capitalism. And so you have all these billionaires in China, and still there's a lot of poverty. But generally, if you've been to China, I mean, it's actually doing reasonably well economically. So India was in that same boat, just like China was in the 50s and 60s, just, unbelievable poverty. But then this guy Modi was elected president. And I remember when he came to Houston, I was here just in Houston in 2019 or 2020. He came and spoke in Houston. There's a huge Indian population in Houston. And they took the giant NRG stadium and filled it with Indian people for him to speak. But this guy, I know that there's been criticism of him, and I don't really know the full extent. But under his leadership, India has turned around. I mean, they have done actually really quite well. But I think India is less central plan and more entrepreneurial spirit, like you were talking about in Texas and the United States traditionally. And so they've been on a different development path. So maybe there are some lessons to be learned, for Africa, from the experience of India. And of course, what you were saying earlier about BRICs and how the China and Russia and South Africa and various other countries kind of getting together to counterbalance the West, the G7. I have mixed feelings about that, but maybe there are some, positive things that could come from that. I know I've heard that China is investing a lot in Africa, but maybe what you were saying, and maybe again, you should look a little bit more at examine what India has done that has been helpful and workable for their economy that might be different from the pathway that China has taken. So what do you think about that?
Also, NJ, also, Dr. Brooks, you brought up some great points, but also, NJ, last week, BRICS had their meeting and they created a grain consortium to help food amongst BRICS members. Maybe we'll table that question here for a bit. Have you heard of that? Because that's another thing as well. So, sorry.
I think BRICS is a very, very important economic bloc that they've had, but we have to be very careful. If that economic bloc they're trying to build as BRICS, if it becomes something that is anti-Western, then I think it's going to fail and it's going to be counterproductive. You cannot you cannot politicize the contribution or negate the advantage or things that Western civilization has driven for us. It has driven human flourishing. It has taught us a lot of things on how to really be able to build societies. But also, it has also given us things that we today to value the most, and that has really been able to unleash our potential and our freedoms. That is the belief in democracy, the belief in the rule of law, the belief in private property, and all of that. Those principles are so guiding that if you ever shift away from that, then you're creating a system where you're going to have oligarchs and you're going to have central governance and you're going to have more dictatorships or empires and all of that. That is not what is supposed to be our future in talking about a multipolar world. Of course, the Western financial systems have not been good for us or some of that. But, I'll go with what they say, don't end it, mend it, and fix it. So you look at issues around, like I have always been critical of the Western financial systems where they look at natural gas in Europe and say it's green energy and they can finance it. But then you look at natural gas in Africa, they say it's not green energy, they wouldn't finance it. And also their tendencies to look at Africa and to fill in the egos of the Western elites. And all they want to talk about is aid, handouts and foreign aid. But they look at the thing and say, you've put in $800 billion in this continent in foreign aid, man. It's giving us nothing. It's actually held us backward. Like, stop giving us aid. It's helping us. And I saw BRICS brings a new sense where you talk about it's going to be development, it's going to be trade, it's going to be breaking down some of the trade barriers, even though a lot of BRICS countries have to walk in because we had, as an African, we do have a lot of trade deficit with Russia, a lot of trade deficit with China. The
Right.
ship comes to Africa from China with a lot of goods and services, and that ship goes right back to China empty. We need to be addressing that and all of that. And that is where we come into saying that we need to get a fair trade balance where, again, it gets back to the beginning of this discussion. Produce in Africa, manufacturing in Africa, grow in Africa, because when you produce in Africa, manufacturing in Africa, grow in Africa, when that ship comes from China, it's going back to China with our own goods. So if you're not going to let our goods come to China, we're not going to let your goods come to Africa. And the same with Brazil, the same with India, the same with Russia. It's not protectionism. It's just calling that it's equal trade, and it's going to have to be fair. But we can't do that hating Westerners. That is just wrong. It doesn't make sense. We can't do that saying whatever has come into us. I think African Western societies are like peanut butter and jelly. They get along well. And I think anything separates that relationship that has gone through pain, difficulties, but sometimes we always find a way to drive through the same sing-song. But we also have to welcome other partners in order to see that we can fast-track our development given where we are right now. But I am concerned with anything that comes with BRICS that is politicized against Western society. That is wrong, and I think it would not work in Africa, and they better be careful how they approach that.
Outstanding points.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's fantastic. Now, I would say, the viewpoint that you're expressing is what we would call a traditional, which is very, very similar to a traditional American point of view. This is hard work, investment, thoughtful, not depending on others, self-dependence to a degree, while still working together. But those are values that I think have been very successful over the last few hundred years in the United States. And to the extent that even in the United States or Western Europe, they've gone to systems that involve more and more government handouts and that sort of thing, it has been destructive of their economics. So, personally, I'm in very strong agreement with you. But I have a question for you, NJ. Are you finding that your viewpoint, are you a lone wolf crying in the wilderness of Africa? Or do you find that there are a lot of younger people or, people your own age, which is sort of semi-young? Are they resonating with you? Do they have similar values, or are they sort of stuck in this, this other kind of viewpoint that is not very successful? Because I agree. I think that, that idea that you have could be very successful anywhere if it caught hold and people agree that that is the way that that things should operate.
Robert, we started the African Energy Chamber in late 2018, and in 2021 we had about 100,000 members. In 2024 we have 4.3 million members. So we actually larger than some countries. Wow. So it is resonating, it is catching, because Africans do realize one thing. They see that there's better opportunities for them, and can be better opportunities for them if we make that happen in Africa than crossing the Mediterranean or dying through the Sahara to go walk on European streets. There is also a segment of Africa that, because of its frustration with what they've seen with Western society and some of the inequalities they've seen, for example, when you look at COVID, where most of them were refused vaccines, they have tended towards a radical extremist path that has been more embracing into dictatorship sometimes, that because they've been frustrated with imperfect democracies. But the truth of the matter is that democracies is a work in progress, and you have to make it work by creating economic opportunities. That's why you have to get with those principles of limited government. and I think it's catching on. There's a silent majority. The reason why you look at Africa today, that you find somebody come from America or Europe and start talking about this, the almond milk and goat cheese, energy transition crap that they try to spew out there, it doesn't stick because people just don't buy that. You try to, on where you would try to go to say, oh, you know what? Your life is going to belong in the hands of NGOs. It doesn't stick. I'm the guy with 2 weeks ago, I had 1,000 people protesting in front of my office, sponsored by Western NGOs to protest against what we do. There is a reason for that. The problem here is that we are fed up with the neoliberal ideas that comes in and say NGOs and handouts are going to be a path to your future. That is telling you that being a welfare queen is your path to success. It doesn't work. And people now are themselves and they're saying, you know what? They see Africans today, and especially the young ones, they are more sophisticated than anybody would expect. And these NGOs tend to think that they can just do handouts and say, we'll give you $5 to go protest and buy into this radical idea and some fried chicken. I think that's insulting. They can get on Instagram, they can get on TikTok, they can get on Facebook, and they're looking at two young Americans sitting in Boston, and they've never had a mortgage, but they run the largest hotel chain called Airbnb, and they're saying, I can be like these guys. They're seeing young Americans, innovators. They're creating different things, and they're driving, and they're harnessing the power of technology. And they're saying, we can be that. We created mobile money and perfected it so well in Kenya that it became a system that the Germans are now using. And they say, if we can unleash our potential, and when I talk to them across Africa, they say, listen, create me an enabling environment and deal with your above ground risk issues. We are ready. There is that hunger because they know that they can make billions and billions of dollars by being in Africa. So there is that hope. So I think that big push of where we're waiting for the benevolent white man to come from Europe or America to save us, it's not there anymore. That's why I keep telling everybody, Superman is not coming. Batman is not coming. Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. You would have to get through the good old-fashioned hat walk, and people tend to recognize, and I think most Africans tend to agree with us, then they agree with this radical mindset that is not going to work. And I think you're seeing a shift, and that's why we continue to attract a lot more people into our energy movement. That is not just all about energy, but it's about markets, about ground race issues, enabling environment, and inspiring people to unleash their true potential to make sure that they can do for themselves what the NGOs or the government expect for them. That kind of libertarian mindset where you are free, a free thinker, and you're free to really drive yourself and use free market enterprise to drive development in your communities. It's what is really going to drive our continent, and we've seen a big movement towards that.
Well, that's very hopeful. I'm really glad to hear that. I know, I've gone to.
I'm a prisoner of hope.
Yeah, well, I think that's great, and don't worry about those people who are, protesting or whatever outside of your offices. That's just an indication that you're having a good effect. Okay,
it means you're doing the right thing.
Thank them. You should thank them and say, thank you very much. You recognize that we're a threat to what you're doing. That's great. We're doing better than I thought. So that's really great. And I certainly hope that you grow, this kind of thinking, your organization grows, your influence grows, and so forth. I have seen this, by the way, even at economics conferences. I've been part of Association for Energy Economics, International Association for Energy Economics, and at various conferences around the world. And you do see small groups of Africans who are part of this. And, when you talk to them, they're obviously, these are very smart young people, who really do want change. They really do want to help their individual countries. They're all from the same country. And of course, sometimes we forget Africa. We think Africa is some little dinky thing. Africa is like huge. And there's, lots of different areas within Africa that all have their own individual problems. So I do recognize that. But anyway, the point is that, what unfortunately I think we found here, NJ, is that a lot of these young people, as they move from academia, to where they're going to be going to their careers, where do they end up going? They end up going to Houston, to LA, to New York, to other places in the United States, because they recognize that the opportunities are still for them and their families are better. There's a huge number of Nigerians in Houston, for example. Why aren't they in Nigeria doing good works in Nigeria? So I would hope that this would be a factor that gradually and maybe even faster, can change. It's I'll just say one thing and then let you talk, please. A long time ago, I was, hiring for my company, and a couple of Indians came. And these are Indians who were young people who had just gotten out of college and were looking for their first jobs. And of course, they were working for an American company in Los Angeles at that time. And they were just, happy to have jobs. But every single one of them had the dream that they were going to go back to India and help back in India. My guess is that, so many of these Nigerians and Africans who are in the Houston area, probably most of them working in the oil and gas industry like you did, probably, because that's what's big here, and computer industry, which is big here too. But, probably in their hearts, they would like to go back, and do something that would help. Their parents might still be living there, their uncles, their aunts, their cousins might still be living in Nigeria or Angola or South Africa or wherever it is, and they want to help. So anyway, there's a lot of resource there. Just want to, mention that there is a lot of resource in the United States that, could be part of your movement, to help Africa to do, to meet its own destiny in a very successful way.
I agree with you. I think we need to have a concerted effort to actually attract Africans in the diaspora to come right back and contribute right into this continent. The United States of America has given some of the best training to Africans, be it engineers, be it lawyers, be it doctors, be it geologists, be it economists. You can't beat that. But also that's the America, and I love the action you find in that country, opportunity, and there's sometimes we have to look at it from a different perspective. We have to not Africans as the environment is victimhood or anything, but we also need to stop looking at ourselves as victims. Guess what? We need to challenge our own public system to create that environment that welcomes criticisms, welcomes innovation, welcomes people with different ideas, because that's how we're going to unleash our true potential. And I think those of us that have the ears of leadership, that have the possibility to really open those doors, it is up to us to open that. I mean, it's not for the faint of hearts. But we have to make sure that even a frozen chosen can still be able to just be here and work with their families. That is what we must do, because when we do that, then we really able to bring people that have an amazing ability to create. Because if you want to develop an app today, you want to be in Africa, because you're going to see a lot of challenges, and your app will be having more impact. It will really fix challenges and fix problems. But we got work to do in Africa. How we do with our governance issues, how we do with freedom issues, how we do with democracy, how we do even in the business area, how we do with taxes. You can't tax somebody too damn much out of business. A guy comes to the United States, maybe he takes money out of his 401k, has $500,000, and by the time he even makes $1, he's already giving the government $100,000 or $150,000 in taxes. We need to incentivize this and say, if you come from outside with money and you're going to invest right here, we are going to give you that freedom to work for at least for 3, 4 to 5 years without taxes. So that gives you a chance to take an opportunity, invest and take risks, and be patient, because you don't just need quick capital, you need patient capital. And when you have patient capital, these people can use that American spirit to that they are going to get up at 4 a.m. and go out there and really hustle and really and show an example that others could see rack to riches stories, and it can be done right here. So we need to be pushing that, and we're driving that, And I'm a guy, I'm a low tax guy. So I never forget to tell the president your taxes are too damn high, cut the damn thing so that more money can go around in the communities.
Yep.
You can have multiplier jobs, and you can expand the tax base by getting more people jobs and everything, getting more money, getting more taxes into the hands of politicians. I have never seen a good result with that. I rather people have jobs and rather have more opportunities. And you talked about LPG. Imagine getting this LPG and getting virtual pipelines rather than waiting for big pipelines. Virtual pipelines with trucks and getting up there. So you don't need a PhD, you just need some PhDs to getting these things to work.
I love it. Well, I'll tell you what, we're about out of time here, but NJ, how do people get a hold of you at the African Energy at your website? I've got your LinkedIn. It will be in the show notes. But what is the website for the African Energy Chamber?
It's called energychamber.org. You could visit us. And next week, we're going to be hosting the largest energy event in Africa, something similar to Gastech or CERAWeek. It's called the African Energy Week.
Nice.
Lord help me, we got people coming from everywhere, from Europe, United States, China, India, Russia, and all over Africa. We are going to be taking a
Nice.
bold step to defend the right to use fossil fuels. We don't think fossil fuels is the enemy. If emissions are the problem, let us work with technologies to capture emissions and keep trying to operate in a low carbon fashion so that we can
Nice.
have energy growth in Africa. And as we end this, let's not forget this. For us, it's not an addiction to fossil fuels, or as they say, we all junkies. No. 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. 900 don't have access to clean cooking technologies, most of them women. We cannot meet those
Wow.
United Nations Sustainable Development Goals if a continent that produces less than 3% greenhouse gas emission is being told that you cannot use your natural resources to better the lives of your people. We are going to give you aid to leave your resources in the ground. I think that's colonization gone green, and we stand to oppose that at Africa Energy Week, and we want to work with our partners in Europe, United States, wherever, to really be able to drive up sustainable gas development in Africa, while at the same time bringing renewables into our energy systems. We're not against renewables. We just believe that it should not be choked down to us in a way that does not really help us.
Well said. This is so, again, I can't wait to give you a hug one day because I just really like everything that you have just said. And I cannot wait to get this story out. Dr. Brooks, thank you so much. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, our website is very simple, rbac.com or www.rbac.com. We've got a lot of information there. Our work, has to do with more sort of planning, in support of planning in the energy industry, focused on natural gas. And, we are, as a company, we are very interested in the future of Africa. It's a big question mark. I'll just say that, NJ. It can go in so many different ways. And we really appreciate the fact that you are one of the few, I think, guiding lights for a rational future for Africa here. And I certainly wish you the best of success. I don't know, what the future will hold, whether you and I or Cyrus and you or whatever might, find ways of working together. We certainly have a very common goal as far as Africa is concerned, and really the whole world. We want Bangladesh to do better. We want other areas of the world in South America that are not doing very well. We would like them to do better. It's not just Africa, but certainly Africa is one which has been, traditionally has not gotten, I think, its fair share and its a fair deal. So it's time. It's time for Africa, and it takes people like you, to move that forward. And I wish you the best of success in all of your efforts there.
Well, thank you so
man.
much.
God bless you.
Hey, thank you, NJ. And thank you all so much. And for that, we'll have all of their contact information in the show notes. And thank you for stopping by the Energy Newsbeat podcast.